Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, and soon to be going to Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human Arif Hassan. Arif, instead of doing my customary, what the hell was that? Or my customary, boy, the Vikings defense sure sucked tonight. My question to you is this. Was that the worst Kirk Cousins performance of all time? Or were there just 3/4 of the worst Kirk Cousins performance of all time?
Well, I only did a deep dive into how he's performed in primetime because, of course, once the narrative is set, games like this just do an amazing job of reinforcing that narrative. So I only looked at his primetime games, which are, generally speaking, statistically the worst, although there are a couple of games against the Bears specifically that I remember that were not in primetime that were pretty bad. And it's the worst primetime game that he's ever played in, which I think should tell you a lot, right? Like, that's wild.
It's not good. You know what? We're not doing the Patreon stuff tonight. We're not doing PayPal. We're going to London for this team. We'll hit that at the end if I remember it, because we're just going straight into this review of the game. There's no point to plug or shill after what we just witnessed. This is a team that made it into the red zone multiple times, and Kirk threw 3 picks in the red zone. I mean, if you count the red zone as the 30-ish, which apparently ESPN is every time I get an update that I have a player in the red zone now. Thank you, ESPN Fantasy. I don't care. But there's like 3 picks there. Darius Slay is not the second coming of Darrelle Revis. Instead,
right? Well, I mentioned on last week that hey, I don't think that there's a cornerback in the NFL that can cover Justin Jefferson. Maybe 2009 Darrelle Revis, 2013, Richard Sherman. I thought it would take, and
2020 friggin' 2 Darius Slay as apparently needs to have that jersey enshrined in Canton.
It's incredible. 7 passes defensed, 5 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, something crazy like that.
Kirk Cousins was putting up Ponder numbers. I haven't seen a quarterback do half the things he did tonight since Ponder. He had all the calm and just he had all the calm and zero dark LeBron in him. Of a parking lot full of whale vomit. The guy just stunk on national TV so hard.
I did find a worse statistical game for Kirk Cousins, by the way.
Was it the Buffalo game?
No, it was the Colts game that I barely remember from week 2 of 2020.
Wow, the COVID year.
Yeah, 28-11. Kirk Cousins. So this actually is the worst game of his statistically. He had 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks for 18 yards. Not included in the statistics is a safety that he took. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, a lot going on. So I don't even know where to begin other than the play of Kirk Cousins and the drops of these receivers. Is this just like a karma situation after laughing at Watson from the Green Bay Packers so many times over the past week? Is that
a
what
little
this
bit?
is?
I think a little bit, but also the thing is, Kirk played pretty well through the first quarter and a half. That interception, for example, wasn't on him. His second and third interceptions, I believe, came in the third quarter. He wasn't all that bad. There were drops. I thought that he was over targeting Irv Smith for some reason, which we can get into in a second. But that was an entire, and then the second half collapse was just bonkers.
I remember seeing a stat from the Packers game last week that proceeded to crown Kirk Cousins as far as his ability to play under pressure and his quarterback rating under pressure. It was astonishingly high last week. That is not the case this week.
Indeed. Is
that the result of Cousins doing something incredibly stupid? Is that the line? What happened here?
So I was just really quickly looking up like Cousins' stats in the first half, and they actually went 9 for 15, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Okay, so yeah, that first half actually was not terrible. Yeah, so he was blitzed on 48.8% of his dropbacks, which leads the NFL for week 2. The Eagles, which, if you recall the episode with Ben, didn't blitz all that much last year, didn't blitz all that much against the Lions. There's been a lot of consternation about this fact that they don't tend to blitz all that much. Decided to send a bunch of blitzers, and the thing is, Cousins was not pressured a ton. Like, the blitzes didn't always get home. His pressure rate was 31%. Jalen Hurts' pressure rate was 28%. They're nearly identical in pressure rate. But Cousins, for whatever reason, seemed to kind of panic. And actually, one of the reasons I wanted the Vikings to blitz Jalen Hurts a little bit more, and by blitz, I just mean send 5 rushers. I don't mean send like second-level players, which the Vikings didn't blitz, I don't think, until the third or fourth quarter. They had a 0% blitz rate through the first half. Is because Hurts does not have a very good he doesn't use the hot read very much, doesn't use the tools available to him to prevent blitzes from getting home. And very much it seemed like here, Cousins just also wasn't doing that, also did not have a response to the blitz. It was very, very frustrating. I'm actually going to take a look at just the dropbacks where he's blitzed. This is something I can only do while I'm still at the Athletic. So live stat lookups immediately after a game, that's going to go away. Sorry, guys. But see, yards per attempt when blitzed. Okay, so number 1 in week 2 was Patrick Mahomes. Number 2 was Lamar Jackson. Okay, that makes sense. I'm going all the way down here. Oh, 0.25 yards per attempt when blitzed. Guess who that is?
Boy, my grandmother's dead, so it couldn't be her. Who else could it possibly have been? It's not the Queen.
No.
Was it Kirk Cousins?
No, the Queen famously survived a blitz, but but it's well known for surviving the blitz. That's a historical fact, James. Anyway, Kirk Cousins against the blitz, 0.91 EPA per dropback, the second worst in the NFL in week 2. James, I don't know what's so funny.
Hey, I eventually muted myself, all right?
Second worst response to the blitz in week 2. The only worst one was Ryan Tannehill, who was benched for Malik Willis. So Cousins was not benched for whoever the backup quarterback is now. Was it Nick Mullins? Actually, that would have been interesting to see. And only at 1 point. So I said 0.25. That was in the first half. 1.83 yards per attempt over the course of the game when blitzed. Not good. 2 of his picks, although also his touchdown, were on blitzes. He had a 36% adjusted completion rate, so that includes drops. I don't really understand it, because against the blitz, generally speaking, he's not like quite this bad. But this is astronomically bad.
At one point, I was watching. They were in the red zone. It was, I forget if it was the first or the second pick. I saw Thielen in the slot going across, and I went, great. It looks like it's going to Thielen. Thielen's open. Thielen's got a great shot. And that's when Justin Jefferson made a mistake and went on the outside of Jalen Reagor and it was a pick in the end zone. And I just sat there for a moment and just went, where has Thielen been? Why
Oh,
is
you don't got to worry about him. He was just open underneath.
why was Darius Slay targeted so many times today? He's not on our team.
Yeah. Thank you, James.
That's my
So sad. But he's not on our team.
That's my analysis of this game. He's not on our team. Why?
Yeah. So Kevin O'Connell said after the game, I thought Kirk battled tonight. I put him in some tough spots. I put this 100% on me. And he said a couple of other things about how he failed to prepare and he called a bad game. And I actually think that that's kind of true. I think that he did a poor job of anticipating what the Eagles would do, which in fairness to him, they did a bunch of things they don't normally do, like blitz, right? It's I have to make sure that I do much more to help our guys play to the standard. Some of that's coach speak, right? Some of that is just hey, I need to protect the quarterback a little bit. I need to make sure that, the heat doesn't all go on him. But some of it, I think that he was calling a bad game. He was calling plays that where either Kirk felt the need to target Justin Jefferson in double coverage, where one of the two was Darius Slay. Sometimes he didn't have answers. Sometimes the only answer underneath was Irv Smith, who featured really heavily in this game. And I understand why. They didn't want Jordan Davis on the field, so they didn't put CJ Ham in. But when that's not working, when Irv Smith cannot separate against the linebacker over the middle, you either have Irv Smith run some deep routes, right? Which that worked, right? He just happened to drop that pass, or you don't use Irv Smith. Those are your two responses to the fact that he consistently cannot separate against those linebackers over the middle. It's so weird that the Eagles would blitz a lot, and that one of your best answers to the blitz is to throw the crossing route over the middle, and that's not working, and then you don't change anything about it. I know a bunch of Vikings fans were angry about how the defense wasn't adjusting, and I actually don't know if that's quite true, and it's really difficult to tell what the defense was doing without a complete look at the coverage in the back end. I think the defense, it's difficult. The defense is very much in the style of what the Staley Fangio defense tends to do, which is always look like they have two safeties up deep. There are some problems, I think, with the defense, but in the second half, they did tighten up a little bit. And so I do want to say they did adjust. The offense, didn't, right? The offense did a very poor job of figuring out when space would be available. They did a very poor job of timing out when those screens would happen. They didn't give Cousins alternate options for when those screens weren't working. And I understand, again, that when you put a screen, especially a running back screen, into the play, you don't have many other options because, your quarterback is under duress. You have to get rid of the ball quickly. But the Eagles sussed out basically every single running back screen, right? Every single time a running back was the target of a screen, I was like, oh, it's a good thing he dropped that. Otherwise, that would have been a loss for 4 yards, right? That just wasn't good. On one of them, Alexander Madison touches the ball and then gets suplexed, right? He clearly was not getting enough space on any of this. So part of that, I think, is just offensive play calling. And when that screen isn't available to you, there better be a quick somewhere else that Kirk Cousins can throw to. And Cousins himself should throw those away because those are going to be picked off if you keep doing it. So there's a lot of elements of failure here. I don't think it's just on Cousins. I think that we should recognize that Cousins actually had a pretty good first quarter and a half or first half. And then, it's not his fault that Irv Smith dropped the ball. It's not his fault that Justin Jefferson stopped that route. It's not his fault that Irv Smith can't fight against a running line, a run defense linebacker in coverage. Those are decisions that he makes that I kind of understand, where, he could have been more accurate on some of those Irv Smith throws over the middle, but there's that. And then Cousins gets knocked off his rocker or something. He just cannot adjust. And he has a poor response to these blitzes. So that part is on him, especially the second half. Very weird game all around, because the first half and the second half both looked different to me on offense and defense for the Vikings, but everything was still terrible.
Hey, can I make your night worse?
Oh, off. What is happening? You sent this link to him? Is this you put it in the Discord? What happened?
This.
I don't understand
I
what's
called
going
Kevin
on.
clearly sent it to him. There's no hacking.
I called Kevin O'Connell's dad, and I
Luke
had
couldn't
him
hack his
hack
way
the
out of
email.
a paper bag. I'm surprised he can read.
I don't know.
Well, I can't.
I've been drinking, and
Oh my god!
I accidentally sent the link to do the show to Luke instead of the Google chat with you. So
the Google chat with me looks identical to
it does.
a DM with Luke Braun.
After this much scotch, it does.
No, it doesn't.
It can happen to Alex Jones's lawyers. It can happen to anyone.
How much of that did you listen to, Luke?
The back half of all the cousins ranting, pretty much.
Cool. What do you think about it?
Yep. Everything was bad, and one thing being bad does not excuse another thing being bad. As you can't really be wrong if you say something was bad tonight.
No, but I think that's important. It's so easy to just say, "Hey, this thing was bad." All right, good, solve the problem. Next week, they're gonna play Nick Mullins or whatever. No, everything was bad.
Yeah,
Patrick Peterson was bad.
Patrick Peterson
was bad, at least
Patrick
for the first
Peterson,
half.
special teams expert. Patrick Peterson.
Sorry, Patrick Peterson, the defender, was bad?
Yes, thank you. Patrick Peterson, the kick blocker.
Yeah, I'll be clear. This is the Chris Boyd distinction. Kirk Cousins was bad for half the game. Kevin O'Connell was bad for the other half of the game. Jefferson made some really critical mistakes. All of this is important. The only perfect soul tonight was Adam Thielen.
Was he perfect? Did he not suck in the first half, or was it just like not his fault that he didn't get targeted?
Again,
he didn't get targeted.
I want to point out the punter.
I could be wrong.
I want to point out that our punter was astonishing.
Actually, no, that's a good point. Actually, yeah.
Ryan Wright will save us when the rapture comes.
The punting tonight was absurdly good. That coffin
again,
kick?
I forget the special teams. Well, I mean, a lot of the special teams were really good for the Vikings. So not just Ryan Wright, but like the kickoff coverage was fantastic. The kicking was like the kickoff itself was good. You know, the way that they dropped it right in front of the end zone. Like Greg Joseph did a good job on the things that he was asked to do, which is not very much, but great kickoff coverage, great punt coverage, great punting, great field goal block. Yeah, do you know special teams only accounts for like 18% of your variance and win rate? Not all three phases are equal.
The only person walking tall in TCO tomorrow will be Matt Daniels.
And not just the fact that he towers over everyone but the line.
He'll be salivating.
Oh yeah,
he's salivating. Yeah, for sure.
That's just. Oh god. Well, Luke, I'm glad that you're here, which is something that Arif would never say aloud.
Yeah, because I'm not thinking it. I don't lie, James.
You encourage others to, as is evidenced by a lot of the Don from Ohio questions, but you yourself don't believe in the practice.
Don from Ohio is lying about me encouraging him lying. You get that? There's a lying about lying.
I literally have you on tape saying I shouldn't have told him to lie.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. I think you're making that up. And I think you're a clever audio producer that would find a way to whatever voice photoshopping is, deep faking a clip. I think that's what would happen here. Note to listeners.
Note to listeners. Let's just ruin.
Do not believe anything you hear on the Norse Code podcast. It's all fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We 100% endorse that.
We are not role models. We are not a gambling podcast. We do not sell Audible. Luke, you feel like doing an ad read? We can do an ad read right now. I'm sure I have ads.
Yeah, you love that.
I could do an ad read.
Yeah, what do we got?
We've got experience.
You know, it's about time. You know, we did the great April Fool's Day episode with all of the ad reads there. I'm sure I can find the show notes that have the Arif's Shadow Clan or whatever the hell the YouTube or not YouTube the game
Raid
was.
Shadow
The
Legends.
Raid Shadow Legends?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Raid Shadow Legends.
yeah.
Was
Look, you were so
particularly epic.
excited about that one.
I have
Shadow
done Raid
Legends?
Shadow Legends ads for a lot of different people.
Who's your favorite hero, Luke?
Stockholm Syndrome.
How amazingly appropriate. That's terrible.
With the Vikings.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on and annoying Arif. Sometimes,
My pleasure.
yeah.
I bet. You only live to cause misery. I know this.
Yep. See you tomorrow morning.
God.
The best part is he reminded you that you have to talk. to
Don't
him
wake
tomorrow.
up. I don't mean for the show. I mean, period.
After that game, I'll
Ever.
consider it.
Good.
All right, thanks, Luke. That might be one of my finest moments in North Dakota history.
Yeah, one of the greatest moments of the podcast occurring in like year 10. Perfect.
It's year 9. It's not. It's
Well,
not. Year 10.
we just crossed our 9-year anniversary, right?
Well,
So-
we're in the 10th season, but it's not year
Right.
10. It's the 10th season. It's like
Right,
a Tribe
so
Called
we're
Quest. You have to
in-
say the whole thing.
well, but like 9 AD is like the 10th year, right?
Yeah, kind of, but
All right, good. Great.
because
Fantastic.
I'm of the belief that you're wrong here. I'm gonna stick to my guns and deflect and go right back to the discussion on Kirk Cousins because that seems appropriate. Kirk Cousins was our leading rusher tonight, unless that changed after I turned off the game. Listen, this is a game that I famously rewatched the game that caused Dusty to lose his mind.
Yeah.
The Eagles game, the Eagles NFC Championship game. Not only did I sit through the entirety of that at that Super Bowl or at that bar because you got a free Super Bowl party if you stayed, and because everyone left, our odds of winning were astronomically high. And we did in fact win. So we got a bunch of free food and free drinks for the Super Bowl then 2 weeks later. I rewatched that game a second time just so we could talk about it on the show and attempt to break it down in a reasonable way. So that shows you I've rewatched the 2009 NFC Championship game and done it for the show. I have a tolerance for these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely could not finish this game. It was too much. Kirk Cousins, when I turned it off, Kirk Cousins was our leading rusher.
Well, they did, after you turned it off, they did give Dalvin Cook the ball a couple more times. But Kirk Cousins finished the game as the leading rusher.
And why the hell not?
But Dalvin Cook was second, tied with Jalen Reagor.
I'm sorry. Something crazy got in my ear. You want to repeat that?
Dalvin Cook was second on the Vikings in rushing yards, tied with Jalen Reagor.
Oh, God.
Who
Why?
had one carry for 17 yards. Well, because they gave Jalen Reagor the ball.
Well, no, I know that. It was more of an existential why, as opposed to why would they do that? There was a play during the game when I watched CJ Ham go into, just run a route. And my only thought was, really? This is now? Now we're going to get cute with it? All right, whatever. Oh, this
Hey, but CJ Ham's on the field. Fantastic.
Hey, listen, big supporter Captain Ham. He was out there for the coin toss. I remember that. That was a highlight, despite the fact the Vikings lost
That was
it.
a highlight. Right.
But still, it was good to see him. Victor, my younger brother, came over tonight to watch the game with me, and he's about as if the Vikings do terrible, I'm going to go home and whatever. He does that often. He left the first play of the third quarter. He was done, or that drive anyway. He left. Two men sitting, drinking a beer, watching a Vikings game, both in CJ Ham jerseys, and he couldn't handle it anymore. He was out. I hate this. I was overwhelmingly positive last review.
And I was cautioning you. I said, maybe don't do that.
I was positive.
I repeated this multiple times that you should.
I'm the stinger on the show saying that Vikings are not to be trusted, and for a
Mhm.
moment I trusted them.
Yeah,
You
that's how they
know,
get you.
I don't. Dusty never calls me for any reason. He called me after this game and was telling me about his evening. Has he told you about his evening? This is actually relevant to the game.
Okay.
So
Well, let me know.
so he ended up over at an event over at Mile High. Whatever the field is called, it doesn't matter. He ended up over at Mile High for an event, and there's a bunch of Broncos players out there, and they were out signing autographs, saying hi, whatever. And the player that ended up getting drafted by the Eagles that just kind of got the Jalen Reagor deal over in Denver. His name escapes me, but I think he's a center. But he was over at the thing, and Dusty talked to him tonight, and Dusty walked up. Dusty's wearing a Broncos jersey and says, "Hey, how's it going? Yeah, good to see you got out of Philadelphia. I got my Vikings jersey on underneath the Broncos jersey," and the guy just goes, "Oh, you haven't been paying attention to the score, have you?"
Oh no.
Dusty proceeded to explain he's never felt that owned in his entire life as he had in that moment. Slowly but surely, he turned into a corn cob. It's just... Yeah, he never calls me for any reason. He called me for this, to go, why the hell did the Vikings do this on national TV? Why? Defense, is this a new plan by Ed Donatel to be 10 yards behind the receiver? To give them a running start?
To give them a running start. I would venture to say that was not precisely how the defense drew up some of these plays. I am really curious about kind of the way that defense was set up. I posited on around the NFL that the Vikings seem to be playing a different type of zone than they typically do, which is that they're like most zone defenses around the league, a match zone league where you'll pick up your assignment based off of essentially a series of rules. And then once you pick up your assignment, you're playing them in a type of man coverage. So its zone basically determines what your assignment is, and then you enter man. Here it looked like they were playing a fairly old school version, which was a spot drop zone, which is kind of what we typically think of when we think of zone defense. A defender drops to a particular area of the field, and then that area of the field is just the responsibility no matter what. And when you're playing that, your eyes are toward the quarterback. And when your eyes are towards the quarterback, you have a better ability to, not only grab a couple of interceptions here or there, which was like kind of the point of the Tampa 2, but also to close down when he's running. When your back is to the quarterback, it's much more difficult to, turn around and close down on that quarterback. And for the first half, actually, it worked out decently well. I mean, the Vikings did a pretty good job of stopping the run in the first half, despite having a light box. And so they did a pretty decent job of closing down and preventing Hurts from hurting them on the ground until, the rushing touchdown, second rushing touchdown. The first rushing touchdown, it's just like that's a read option that's going to happen. But they were averaging like 3 yards a carry at that point after that first rushing touchdown. But, eventually it just stopped working. And so I don't know if the Vikings changed the way that defense looked, but certainly it allowed receivers to find seams in the zone and attack those seams, because like a lot of modern zone defenses, it's much harder to find those seams because after a period of time, it begins to look like man coverage, and there's not really a seam because your defenders are kind of plastered against those receivers if you're doing your job correctly. And here it did not look like that at all, and it looked like it was a spot drop zone designed to have their eyes on the quarterback and prevent, runs up the middle, which is one reason they didn't blitz very often. And I thought, maybe that's a mistake.
A mistake, you say?
Perhaps.
You're willing to go out on that limb?
Yeah.
It's possible the wrong decision was made. So all these big plays that just sort of started happening for the Eagles. What worked against Green Bay that didn't work here?
You mean defensively for the Vikings?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess a lot of things. Well, one thing is that they played the whole game differently. Like they blitzed Green Bay, right? They blitzed Aaron Rodgers, not a ton, but a fair amount. Like 9%, which is still less than most of the league, but they showed the blitz a ton, right? And so they would line a bunch of people up at the line of scrimmage. They would showcase a blitz, and then they would blitz, only a couple of those times, but they present a confusing coverage read for Rodgers, which, when you already don't trust your receivers, and you have the ability to get your defenders moving in a way that makes that coverage confusion look like that can throw things off. Here, the Vikings didn't do any of that. Like they were just like, yeah, obviously we're going to rush 4, and our 2 linebackers are going to be out wide, outside of the box, covering the tight ends that are split. And this is obviously it's zone coverage, right? Like, duh. Like I could not imagine an easier read for a high school quarterback than what the Vikings were doing on some of these plays. So it's not like the Vikings, their defense did the thing correctly against Aaron Rodgers and they didn't do the thing correctly against the Eagles. They played an entirely different defense against the Eagles. And I think that makes sense. They just chose the wrong defense, right? Like you should still do more to attempt to disguise your coverage. I mean, it's not like Jalen Hurts is like a running back playing quarterback. He's like a quarterback that's going through his reads. Like, you respect his ability to make reads in general. So that's what happened. And then also it helps that like when Hurts had an open receiver, he would throw it to him, which I know like sounds like you would do that as a quarterback. That sounds like very essential to the nature of the position. But Kirk Cousins didn't do that this week, and Aaron Rodgers didn't do it last week. Like Christian Watson got open a bunch of times against Patrick Peterson, and Rodgers was like, yeah, nope, nah, I'm not having that again. I'm going to throw it to Randall Cobb. Like that's okay, but that doesn't work when it's like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Like both of those players like command enough respect in the locker room, and Jalen Hurts just hasn't won enough Super Bowls. I guess Rodgers only won one, but hasn't won enough MVPs to just say, nah, I don't trust this guy. I'm going to do my own thing. Right? Like he just trusts his receivers and they got open, so he threw it to them. So like, yeah, it was just a completely different setup. So it's not as if the thing they did against Rodgers was the thing they did against the Eagles and it fell apart. They just did a different thing.
I wish there was some way to just erase this game from my mind. You know what? We're doing mailbag stuff. Mailbag will cheer me up. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, why wouldn't a bunch of Vikings fans trying to figure out what happened in this game cheer you up?
Yeah, exactly. Let's go through the mailbag. Andrew asks, for a Reefs podcaster curse corner, how many times did you say critical things about Jalen's passing abilities before you realized that you were manifesting him completely going off?
Okay, I did think about that, not while I was recording the podcast with Ben, but afterwards I was like, a perfect time for him to go like 20 of 24. I think I said 20 of 24 in my brain. How much did he actually go for? Okay, I have it like up somewhere.
Just all these, I say all these live stats. ESPN box scores, got it too. But
right, 26 of 31.
Oh, okay. Well, you were off.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't expect him to throw the ball 31 times. Yeah, but I was like, yeah, it's a good time for him to go like 20 of 24 and throw for like 250 yards. I guess he had 333. So good job. But yeah, I like afterwards I was like, this guy's fundamentally inaccurate. I don't really trust him beyond his first read. And the thing is, like, he didn't have to be all that accurate. He's more accurate in this game than he was against the Lions. But he didn't have to move past his first read all that often. So, like technically some of the things I said could still have been true, but the Vikings weren't good enough to force the issue, as it were.
Tim Rizzo asks, the Vikings are 1-0 this season when a Reef has yet to commit to another job and 0-1 otherwise. My question, how dare him?
But that would mean that if I just stick with the Pro Football Network job, that the Vikings are going to go like 16-1, right?
It's possible, but we're all mad now, so no. Michael Lacoste asks, what time is Kirk's bedtime, and should he be preparing for night games the way teams prepare for playing in London?
Oh, he goes to sleep like an hour later every.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I like that. That makes sense. Yeah. No, I agree. I bet his bedtime's like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Crossed it during the game, which would explain why he was good in the first half, not in the second half.
Yeah.
You nailed it. Oh my god.
He got the sillies.
Got the sillies.
That's
all right, Dad.
Boy, that yeah, I'm gonna ignore that real quick. Nick Howard asks, if Cousins were a B race, what would he be?
I don't see any differences. Why would that matter? What would you argue would an answer be to this, and why would that be an answer?
Don from Ohio asks, is it fair to say Arif could have played defense tonight, and he wouldn't have been any worse than our secondary?
No comment.
No comment on that?
No, I don't recognize my post-high school cornerback career.
Oh. Mav Cop asks, why didn't the Vikings blitz or read the blitz?
Good question. Yeah, the Vikings were blitzed nearly half of their dropbacks. They blitzed on about 7% of opposing dropbacks, and all of that came in like the third or fourth quarter, if not just the fourth quarter. I'll say that they were afraid to blitz because they thought that blitzing would open up some rushing lanes that he'd be able to get out of, which, again, was not true against Detroit. Like, Jalen Hurts was 2 of 10, which I know was the stat that popped up for Kirk Cousins during the broadcast, but Jalen Hurts was 2 of 10 against the blitz in Detroit. And if you include his scrambles, still averaged like negative EPA or only 0.1 EPA against the blitz. So there was precedent to actually blitz him. He was able to generate, the 3rd and 12s and the 3rd and 15s on the ground, not when he was blitzed, but when he got out of a 4-person rush, right? So there's actually like a good reason to blitz him. Like the same reason that Lamar Jackson sees one of the highest blitz rates in the league on a fairly regular basis. I don't know why the Vikings did not blitz more often. I guess they just thought having like 7 in coverage was really important against a quarterback who could threaten to run with his legs, which didn't matter because he just decided to throw it a bunch, and that like was working out for him pretty well.
Beef Brewski asks, could increasing Cousins' squat to over 600 pounds be the change that helps this offense get to the next level?
I would like to see that happen because that would be very funny, but I don't know. I mean, so for people who didn't like watch on the broadcast, like they mentioned it like 3 times in the broadcast, and they actually showed a video of him doing a 600-pound squat at Oklahoma.
Of Jalen Hurts, not of
Jalen
Cousins.
Hurts, not of Cousins. Sorry, of Jalen Hurts doing a 600-pound squat of Oklahoma, and they were relating it to his play on the field, which, in fairness, does help explain how he was able to get like 8 yards magically to get a touchdown on that second touchdown run.
It was impressive.
Yeah, I was boggled. That was incredible.
Yeah. Straw Wet asks, how many honeycombs do you think it would take to help this defense? Also, how many honeybees would it take to defend their hive from 5 Yellow Jackets?
Honeycombs to help the defense. I don't know, like 8? How many? What was the second part of that question?
The second part, as I scroll back up to it, how many honeybees would it take to defend the hive from 5 Yellow Jackets?
Man. So I imagine that it's not like a 1-to-1 thing, that like Yellow Jackets are a little bit better at combat.
More aggressive. More aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, they're a-holes. I mean, we all agree with that. 20 bees?
You throw a wave of 20?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've got a kill switch, so you have to overwhelm them until they hit their predetermined number of kills.
From Beef Brisky, do you think the lack of ham hurt the Vikings tonight?
No. Honestly, I figured that this would be a good example of the Vikings attempting to change their offensive strategy based off of the defense they were playing, and that we would see less Johnny Mutton, less CJ Ham, and more Irv Smith and KJ Osborne. And I think that makes sense because you didn't want Jordan Davis on the field. But in retrospect, is it possible that they could have scored more points with more Ham? Yeah, they only scored 7. The ceiling is unlimited at that point. But that decision, that strategy, tracked for me. That one followed.
Jack Rackham asks, the announcers mentioned all night the Vikings made no adjustments on defense, playing really soft coverages. The only reason I can think to do this is because your personnel simply isn't good enough to play anything else. Do our cornerbacks suck? I'm starting to think they suck.
Cameron Dancer had a weird game, didn't he? A really good drive, right? So you have to figure out kind of what happened on the Quez Watkins touchdown. I think it's very likely that it's entirely on Cameron Bynum based off of what we saw from the dots. But it did seem like Bynum expected Dantzler to be a deep safety. Now it's a sail route, so you've got 3 routes hitting that side of the field, all from different directions. And Dantzler picks up the tight end running across basically an over or a corner route. And Kendricks was initially the one who picked him up and then passed him off to Dantzler. And so Dantzler doesn't have the ability to go deep because he's taking off this corner. And then the guy that is in the flats is covering the receiver that's in the flat. So somebody has to take the deep receiver who's either running a fade or a go. And that should be the safety at that point. We should have seen what the tight end was doing and dropped back. But there is the possibility that that's actually on Dancer and that Kendricks should have kept on following the tight end, which is what Kuechly does in that situation in their cover 3 back when he was a Panther. So it is possible, right? But if we eliminate that play from our consideration and we eliminate that penalty that was soft, that was a crazy penalty to call. I understand there's an illegal contact penalty, and I understand that Dancer stepped outside of his frame to make contact with the receiver. So I get that technically how that penalty occurs, but that's dumb. That's an insane penalty that would be called. So if we take that away, he had a great game. So he does not seem to suck. He seems to be doing all right. Peterson was getting roasted pretty regularly, though. And to your point about these simple coverages, unintended guest Luke Braun did make a point, I think, before the season that you were likely to see a bunch of simple coverages because the cornerback group isn't that good or is relatively new, which is kind of the opposite of how Zimmer handled that situation with a bunch of new corners. And I don't think that that's true. I think, again, that was just a product of the way they wanted to game plan. But certainly you should note that and think about that kind of going forward, because if it continues to be true, then yeah, that might be the case, that they're simplifying their coverages because the cornerbacks just are not capable of doing all these things. But what's interesting is that Patrick Peterson was the one who failed more often than Cameron Dancer.
The Vikings lost to a team that had at least 3 illegal personnel down the field penalties.
Yeah,
at least 3. They had They had some very the third time it happened. I was like, they got some real happy feet there on the on their offensive linemen, just scooting up forward way further than they're supposed to. They lost to a team that had 3 of those penalties.
While blocking a field goal and recovering it and getting a pick to put them in the red zone, right? They had 2 turnovers from that, and also they were up against an offense that had 3 penalties of one type in particular.
How is that even possible?
Neither of the block or the interception returns were returned for scores. So clearly that's on Chris Boyd and Jordan Hicks for not scoring. What were they thinking? They should have scored.
What were they thinking?
And
Professor
then it would have
Poop,
been 21-24.
yeah, Professor Poop asks, given the catastrophic nature of our crappy third down defense, what do good defensive coaches like Zimmer do so differently to keep subpar defenses excellent on third down? You son of wow.
I like this. This is great. Well, also, okay, but Zimmer is like the best third down defensive coordinator in history, right? Like even when the Vikings had a bad defense, they had a good third down percentage. And it's because on third down he knows what they're going to do, not because he's scouted. I mean, he also does this. He does scout on like on what, you know, what opponent tendencies are on third down, but he also like knows like on 3rd and 12 they're going to throw the ball. So I'm not going to worry about like, you know, run defense or anything like that. So I can put in all these complicated pressures and blitzes and not worry about getting somebody out of their gap or anything like that when it comes to run defense. And so he put together these really complicated blitz packages that created really confusing coverage looks that also created one-on-one opportunities for the pass rushers, which, I mean, like Jalen Hurts had a bit of time in the pocket sometimes, but actually I thought the pass rush did fine in terms of generating pressure. It was about a league average pressure rate. I thought both Smith and Hunter did a pretty decent job in terms of generating pressure. But being able to create all those opportunities while also confusing what the read is for the quarterback. And this is why you will see occasionally a player that you don't expect to be in coverage, right? Because DJ Wanham got toasted in coverage, right, on one of these plays. And it's like, okay, well, either you want Ed Donatel to not run a vanilla defense and have some exotic stuff in there that makes it difficult to read what's going on, in which case you do some unexpected things like having a defensive end, or in this case, an outside linebacker, drop from pass rush and into coverage and take that risk, or you want a standard defense that doesn't take those kinds of risks, that doesn't blitz like a nickel corner, right? Like those are your options, and you only notice it when it goes wrong. Zimmer did that stuff all the time, and it worked. Like I get people being frustrated that DJ Wanham was out there trying to cover like Devonta Smith or something nutso like that. And like, yeah, in a vacuum that sucks. But if the counter to that is that like Jalen Hurts has like 1 second to get the pass off and he's throwing it off his back foot, then that's probably a good thing, right? So that's why Zimmer was really good at that, is that he would do that kind of stuff and it would work because he'd create one-on-ones, he'd confuse the read to make it difficult for quarterbacks to identify what's going on. And then he would also make sure, like, hey, if I send a blitz, I know that this is how they want to handle blitzes. I know that they're going to put the running back here. I know that they're going to have a hot route here, and I'm going to just have someone sit on that, right? Like, he knew what the offense was going to do in response to a blitz, and then sometimes he would blitz, sometimes he wouldn't. But he knew what the response was going to be, right? Like, that's the point of defense, but in particular, it makes it easier when you kind of get rid of having to read the tea leaves and just have a clear passing situation like on third down. That's why he's so good at it. Donatel, I get like this. I said this before the season. Maybe the defense gets better. I don't know, but one thing that's going to get worse is the third down stuff for sure.
Let's go to R. Menson, who asks, can Arif provide a level-headed, reasonable take on the Vikings' first 2 games, but he has to provide this take solely via overreacting to both games?
What? God, okay. Jesus Christ. They don't, the games don't go here. This is really difficult. The Vikings are going to be an incredibly unpredictable team. Because from one moment, you'll have an MVP quality candidate in Kirk Cousins throwing to Justin Jefferson, who's on pace for 3,000 yards. And at another moment, you'll have a guy who is so completely flustered by the blitz that you can't even believe that he's been put out there, right? That can only put up 170 yards in passing. That can only put up, 3 accurate passes throughout the entire game. They're going to go 500. We know that because, one game they'll be great, another game they'll be awful. There's no in between with this team. And you know that with a new coach, you're going to get a completely uninspired performance when they have no idea what's going on, and whiz kid type stuff when they do know what's going on. So a divisional opponent like the Packers that they've studied a lot, they're going to be able to pound them into the dirt. A non-divisional opponent like the Eagles that they don't think about a lot or is unfamiliar because of a running game, they're going to get absolutely, thrown into the ground. They won't have the ability to adjust, and they'll give up like 8 of 10 third downs or something crazy like that. That's the closest I can do.
Euleron asks, what do the analytics say about the Vikings performing poorly against teams with the most obnoxious fan bases?
Oh, yeah. The analytics are strong in this one. The only thing that kind of throws a wrench into this is that the Vikings regularly split the series against the Packers. And so that one complicates things, but everyone knows divisional games are different. So you throw that out, you take a look at the Bills fan base before Josh Allen was good, also after Josh Allen was good. You take a look at the Eagles fan base, you take a look at the Cowboys fan base, and yeah, I mean the data's there. It's hard to deny, right? You look at the Vikings against a team with a more reasonable fan base like the Browns before the Deshaun Watson stuff, and sometimes that game's not going to go the right way, but they don't embarrass themselves, right? So yeah, I think that the analytics here are pretty strong. Oh, also they always lose to the Seahawks. So
yeah, that except for last year. Question: was it just the way that the stadium was mic'd up? It seemed like the fans were obnoxiously loud that game.
It feels like that's a response to everybody criticizing the Thursday Night Football game with Amazon.
Yeah,
where the stadium was way too quiet. Just the way that sound was mixed there.
Yeah, it seemed like they were in the crowd in Seattle, like for as loud as that was.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous. Armanson also asks, did Ben DiNucci grant this victory to the Eagles to get revenge on the Cowboys for cutting him?
I can see no other truth but that.
Yeah. Karking asks, the Vikings haven't won a Week 2 game since Sam Bradford. Why has Sam cursed us, and how do we keep it going?
The thing is, I don't think the Eagles have won a Week 2 game since the Sam Bradford trade either. Until now, I guess.
Until now.
Yeah, so it was a mutual curse.
Noah, it's so bad. This is so dumb. Noah asks, are the Vikings a bad good team or a good bad team?
I want to say they're a bad good team. I think that there's some strong foundations here for a team that has the ability to win a lot of games, and then they just make mistakes. Now, obviously, this game was a cavalcade of errors to the point where you have to say that's not a mistake, that's who they are. But I'm just going to count, instead of a play-by-play evaluation of mistakes, I'm just going to count the whole enterprise of Monday Night Football a mistake and just say the mistake was to show up. So I think that for the most part, they'll play like a good team. And then when they're up against good teams, play like a bad team. So I think that they are a bad good team and not a good bad team.
Alex has a really interesting question.
Oh, no.
Going into Week 3, would you rather have the Vikings start or the Packers start? Terrible Week 1 and then beat Chicago Week 2, or destroy the Packers and then get pantsed on national TV against the Eagles.
I guess I'd rather have the Vikings start because losing to the Vikings, losing to a divisional opponent feels worse. So obviously losing to the Eagles sucks. Getting past on national television sucks, but nothing really stings like a loss to the Packers or someone that is like a divisional opponent. So I'd rather have that. And I know that game to game momentum doesn't really exist. And so I'm not too worried about that. So yeah, I would rather have the Vikings start, but certainly it feels better being a Packers fan right now than a Vikings fan.
It's just it's borderline unpleasant. Just why? Jesse from Brooklyn sent this before the game. He said, hey guys, so after Week 2, the top 3 QBs in passing yards are Tua, Carson Wentz, and Joe Flacco, which is upsetting. If you had to construct an equally upsetting top running back and wide receiver trio, who would they consist of?
Oh, man.
P.S. The shower curtain has in fact arrived, and it's just as terrible and frightening as you imagined. Picks are coming soon.
Good. Great. So I have to come up with like the most disturbing trio, or the most disturbing, like, here are the worst three receivers to be leading the league, here are the worst three running backs to be leading the league.
That
okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's interesting. Okay, so at the moment, the top three receivers in receiving yardage are Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and Jalen Waddle. Followed by Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson, almost all of that coming in week 1. The worst receivers to be leading the league. I don't know. It just feels like there's not any like stains of humanity among the receivers that could be leading the league, right? Like,
it would be funny if the wide receiver for the Buccaneers, the one who's now suspended for a game.
Oh yeah, that would be funny. Yeah. So
like, oh well, I was suspended, but I'm still on top. Well,
yeah.
Mike Evans, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Evans. God, a receiver it would be bad if they were leading the league. Michael Thomas, because he's annoying. Like, I know that Michael Thomas is like a good for me from a takes perspective, right? Because I liked him a lot in that draft. I liked him more than almost anybody else, and so I get like that. But he's just like an annoying person. So there's that. So Michael Thomas is one. Probably not Juju Smith. I guess if Anthony Brown or Antonio Brown was playing, but that's reaching a little bit. That's a little bit too easy, right? Man, this
Watson from Green Bay works here.
Oh, Christian Watson would be perfect. Yeah. So Christian Watson, the Mike Evans, right? Because that'd be funny, and Michael Thomas. There you go. And then at running back, I don't know. Like, there's so right now the leaders are Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and Jonathan Taylor. DeAndre Swift is a very close fourth. I think it would be weird if Leonard Fournette was leading, so I'm going to put him up there. Cordero Patterson, I think that one hurts a lot, right?
Yep.
So if he's up there.
What about the second string running back for the Cardinals, just for fun?
Who is it? Chase Edmonds or Eno Benjamin?
I think
I don't know which one the second string is.
I don't think they know.
Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick look at the Arizona Cardinals depth chart. It is
Darrell Williams.
James Conner is the okay. So wait, is Chase Edmonds? Chase Edmonds signed with another team, right? He's with a Dolphin now. Yeah.
Darrell Williams is the second string.
Well, James Conner is the first string, so it might be Eno Benjamin's the second string. So I would go with that. Would actually Tony Pollard actually would be funnier, the second string Dallas guy, because you're just thinking like, why don't they just give more touches? This is so frustrating. Why do they care about Ezekiel Elliott? Tony Pollard leads your team in rushing.
Let's go with
Tony Pollard.
I like the idea that Justice potentially being right and like AJ Dillon is leading the league in rushing.
Oh, actually, no. Yeah, Justice being right is worse than all of this. So AJ Dillon number 1, Cordero Patterson number 2, and then actually I just thought of a better third one, Taysom Hill.
Oh God.
Number 3. Yeah.
You're right.
Perfect.
That's in fact that's pretty cursed. That one hurts. Let's wrap this up with a question from Nick Howard, who asks, can I get a statement from Arif on how bad NDSU would have lost to Arizona if they had Watson and Lance in that game on Saturday?
Oh man, I would have to imagine, because they lost by 3 points, right?
Lost to Arizona. They broke their streak
of FBS victories.
Yep.
Yeah, of course, because they're frauds.
Can you imagine following? Can you imagine following a team that's not in this, not in the top division? Like, come on.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I can't imagine following an FCS team at this point. That's ridiculous.
Our Dukes are doing quite well for themselves.
Yeah, they're among the points leaders in the FBS, as
Mm-hmm.
they deserve to be because they're excellent.
Yeah.
Um,
they're punching down, but doesn't matter.
yeah. I will say it is very annoying that Hunter Lepke got 115 yards in that game. I like straight up hate that dude now. But yeah, no. If they had Christian Watson, presuming he's healthy, right? If they had Christian Watson and Trey Lance in that game, I guess presuming he's healthy too because he just got hurt. But Christian Watson was not like healthy for a good chunk of his FCS career. But yeah, if they had Christian Watson and Trey Lance, they would have definitely. It was 28-31, not 20-24. Yeah, they would have lost by much more than 3. They probably would have lost by 10 or 15
easily. It's unfortunate, but
because it was Arizona -1 or something. And that was the easiest bet. I made so much money in Arizona.
Well, you would have done it anyway, but the fact that you're playing NDSU, you just normally just put money on the team that's playing NDSU.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just money in your bank account.
Yeah, consistently. How many championships have they won in a row?
None, because they play JV.
Oh, that's right. That's that title didn't matter, despite the fact that we went to the semifinal of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to support the local kids, right?
Yes. That's exactly what we were doing on James Madison's social media page.
Oh, that's right. Well, you made it more than I did because I got.
Well, you were blocked. Yeah, you were blocked in the shot more so than yeah. All right. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Before we go, a couple of quick notes, couple of quick thank yous. We're doing the shilling at the end, so yay. We are doing a live show. We are doing it in London. We are doing it at the Antwerp Arms. That is happening immediately after the Saints game. I hope that we are more positive. I hope we talk longer. I think this was more of just like a talk therapy session, and it looks like the time is up, and we're not going to bill insurance for more time. So we're going to be doing that after the game, about half hour, 45 minutes, hour afterwards. So check it out. That'll be fun. A couple of quick thank yous over on Patreon specifically. I would just like to take a moment and say thank you to, Alexander McNeely. Thank you so much for supporting us over on Patreon. And we got a nice donation over on PayPal from Matthew. Thank you, Matthew, so much for donating over there. If you like the show and would like to donate to the show, if you enjoyed today's show, despite the fact that this was a terrible game and we're just recapping this for the sake of recapping it, thus why Luke made an appearance, you can do so over at patreon.com/NorseCode, or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
Well, I'm going to be doing a review of the Eagles game. I don't know if I'm going to be talking about the offense or the defense. Both are catastrophic. But I will have some sort of breakdown of the things that went wrong up at The Athletic. I'll be writing it through the night because why wouldn't I be? And then that's my last piece at The Athletic. Then I'll be over at Pro Football Network. I don't have any pieces planned for them. I haven't actually talked to them yet. So things are going about as well as you'd expect on that front.
So what you're saying is...
It's more the same. This is not different.
Good deal. Well, again, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We will be back later this week to preview the next game on the schedule. It's the Lions, right? I'm not
it's the Lions.
That. Sure, why the hell not? So that'll be the Lions game we'll be talking about. So for Reef, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I cannot stress to you enough how true this statement is. The Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of The Athletic, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.